Okay, so here, you all can see this, right? I'm just gonna move my Zoom windows around. Thank you. Okay, so I am Kelly O'Donnell. I'm the director of Science Forward at Macaulay Honors College. I am a plant ecologist by training, but most of what I do now is promote the teaching of scientific literacy. I have been also the organizer for the City Nature Challenge in the New York City arm of the City Nature Challenge since we started in 2017. So this year is our 5th City Nature Challenge, and I'm so excited for it. The first thing I want to do, though, is acknowledge the land that we'll be making observations on. So the City Nature Challenge New York City takes place in Lenape-Hoking, which is the ancestral unceded lands of the Lenape people. The Lenape-Hoking includes parts of what are now known as New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. And we want to acknowledge and pay respect to Lenape elders, past and present. This land has great significance to the Lenape people who were forced to leave it by the European colonists, and we must recognize this fact as we explore the nature of what is now called New York City. The Lenape were the original stewards of this land and its many different habitats, and there are only a few spaces left that resemble what this area was like before colonization. And so we encourage you to be respectful in these places and in all places in the city. And we ask you to be thoughtful when you're out there on this land and realize that settler colonialism has deeply changed this landscape from what it once was. We hope that your nature observations in Lenape-Hoking inspire you to seek out more information about the Lenape people and culture. And some places to go to look for more information are in the document I shared with the links on it. So what I'm going to do this evening is a quick intro to sort of how this all comes together, and to me, and just get us all thinking about some stuff. I will be, so as a science educator, I will be asking questions. Feel free to just shout out answers if you're comfortable unmuting, or use the chat and I'll read them from the chat. I want to do an sort of what the City Nature Challenge is and how it works, an iNaturalist overview, and then some extra tips about making good observations on iNaturalist, and you'll see what that means later, but basically observations where other people from the iNaturalist community can come in and help you get IDs. So like I said, I'm the director of Science Forward at Macaulay, and Science Forward is a bunch of things, but it's an open educational resource. It's also the name of the required science course for our honors students. So it's a core part of our curriculum. Students take it in the fall of their second year, and it's skills focused and interdisciplinary. So we want students to see that there's a common set of skills that all scientists have when they do science. It's an active class. We want students to practice these skills while they're learning in these different scientific contexts, and it's experiential. And so this is sort of the connection between like us and the City Nature Challenge, because in the fall, attached to our Science Forward course, we do a BioBlitz, and a BioBlitz is basically a limited time frame, a very short time frame in a very specific place, species diversity survey. So in our case, for our Macaulay BioBlitz, it's 24 hours in some city green space. We have all 500 of our sophomores sign up for shifts, and for 3-hour shifts. They're not there the whole time. I am. And this gets them out in the field. We put them on teams with taxonomic experts, or people who are really knowledgeable about the local flora and fauna. They look for as many species as they can, and they record their data on paper and on iNaturalist. So in class, they use these data to do their own research projects. So we engage the students in the entire process of science, from the, asking questions, collecting data, doing the analysis, and then presenting their results at the end of the semester. So in this way, we want students to understand how science works by being actually involved in the scientific process. So the connection here is that the City Nature Challenge is basically a 4-day BioBlitz of the entire city. So, you know, for me, we're running the City Nature Challenge, we're running the BioBlitz in the fall for our 500 students. And then in the spring, we partner with different organizations to bring a BioBlitz to the public. You know, all through the fall and the winter, we're making connections, we're planning events. I mean, this year it's different because we can't all be together for the most part. But this is the connection here, because this is basically a BioBlitz. We're looking for as many species possible in New York City as we can find in those 4 days. So just as sort of a warm up question, if anyone would like to take a minute and think of an answer to one of these questions, or you can put it in the chat or shout it out loud. What was the last non-human species you saw before you came in here? Mine was a house sparrow.
I think a pigeon.
A pigeon. Okay, another bird. We got 2 birds. Anyone else?
A cat.
Oh, and 2 parakeets. A cat. Perhaps is this a cat you perhaps live with?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the last time you can remember making an observation of 2 or more species interacting with each other? This can include a human, because in my heart, I am an ecologist and I want to think about species interacting together.
I saw a neighborhood mockingbird and a blue jay talking to each other, 2 young adults, and that was pretty interesting. I've never really seen that before.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I saw a mockingbird making fun of my cat in front of the house.
Great. We see some parakeets eating together. It's been a little chilly today for like pollinators, but there was a bumblebee when it was warmer a few days ago here. The reason I bring this up is because one of the reasons we do there's the sort of larger educational reasons we do the BioBlitz. But the other thing that it does for us is demonstrate for our students that you can think about ecology when you are in the city, right? You know, ecology is the study of, you know, species abundance and distribution and how they're interacting with each other. You don't have to be someplace where, you know, people would think is more, you know, pristine, like a rainforest or something. You can study ecology right here in the city. And so part of what we hope comes out of things like the BioBlitz and things like the City Nature Challenge is that people realize that, like, you can ask scientific questions about the other species in the city that live here with us, because there are other species, and that awareness that there are more things than humans is another thing that comes out of something like the City Nature Challenge. So things like a BioBlitz, things like the City Nature Challenge, which is a BioBlitz, these are community science events. This was formerly called citizen science. I mean, it's still called citizen science in a lot of places, even in like this slideshow in my later graphics, because they're old. But a lot of people are moving more towards this community science thing because it's less exclusionary, because we're not really, you know, we're not really talking about citizens of a nation. We're talking about the people who live in a place. Citizens, non-citizens, everybody. Anybody can participate in these kinds of science efforts. So since we're all here at this Genspace event, I think people probably know what citizen science is. But I do want to just do a quick sort of overview. So we're basically talking about events where non-professional scientists and scientists, but the sort of the qualifications are not, you know, you don't have to be a credentialed scientist to participate in these things. Anybody can participate in these things. And so you have people making observations and collecting data. They can be designing the research questions, they can be doing the analysis, and they can be communicating the results, which is, you know, all of the process of science you can have people involved in. And there's, And, this is not like a new concept. People, amateur scientists have been doing this forever. They've been collecting real information. That you see this a lot in natural history, how we know about natural history information about a variety of different species, because people were just really into collecting them and learning more about them. And they maybe not necessarily became a scientist, but they certainly were doing investigations. So the term citizen science comes around in the 90s to define the sort of participatory, like anyone can be involved kind of a scientific endeavor. And the value of this, there's a bunch of different values to community science and community science data. The scientific value is obviously you are collecting data about, or you're collecting data, or you're designing projects, or whatever it is you're doing. You are trying to learn about how the natural world works. So you're doing science. So that's its scientific value. The educational benefits, this is sort of why we're so involved in it at Macaulay, is because, it can be informal education, it can be informal education. Citizen science promotes scientific literacy. It engages students in the process of science, or engages anyone in the process of science, and that helps to understand how science works. It also can help sort of generate a science identity. So this idea that you can be a scientific thinker, that you can be confident with scientific information, and that is very valuable. It also has the potential to bring society closer to science and to nature. So bringing about a sense of like ownership and sense of place if you're doing your science in your community in particular. And it can have policy values as well. It raises awareness about environmental issues, and provides evidence for perhaps some pollution disparities. So I have a bunch of examples here. I just want to mention about sort of the power of community and citizen science data for sort of environmental justice, because for decades, environmental justice advocates have been using community science to raise awareness and to empower residents, and to translate that sort of scientific research and that data collection into policy change and action. So I have some great examples of folks who do this in the next slides. And there's quite a few of these. I just want to highlight some of them to just give you an example of sort of the power here. There's the Community Engagement Environmental Justice and Health Laboratory, which is led by Dr. Sakobi Wilson, and its focus is on engaging underserved communities to address disparities in exposure to pollution. They train residents who are impacted by locally unwanted land use, like landfills and power plants and like public transit depots, which unfortunately local governments often intentionally place in underserved communities where more people of color live. And they train these residents to be community scientists, to collect data about air quality, water quality, soil quality, to build this sort of body of evidence that they can then use to push for change. There's also another good example is the Alaska Community Action on Toxics, which was founded by Pamela Miller and Annie Aloha. And they use community science-based, they use a community science-based participatory research model to conduct environmental sampling on toxins, to conduct environmental sampling and toxin research on tribal lands that have been contaminated by US military and industry. And then another good example is the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, which is led by Dr. Beverly Wright. And they partner with communities that are harmed by racially disproportionate pollution burdens, and they train their community members to monitor environmental hazards in their neighborhoods and participate in other research and policy action. So these are all about engaging their communities to build that body of evidence, to demonstrate, harms that are done in these cases. These are all very, environmental focused, to getting this evidence base that they can then bring and push for change for better health outcomes. So that's sort of like the power of community-based science here, and the value of it. So City Nature Challenge is a community science event. And we mostly, in its goals, we mostly focus on sort of the scientific value and the educational value and the community building value, that sort of sense of place that you get from being really observant in your neighborhood. So I want to talk about that. The City Nature Challenge is now one of the biggest community and citizen science events of the year. This year we have 450 cities participating, which is amazing. We just got that number like on Monday, and I was shocked because a few weeks ago it was less. So it's globally organized by the California Academy of Sciences and the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. And then it has individual organizers in each of the partner cities. So like me for New York City. It's an international effort to get everyone outside looking for all of the things that live with them in their shared urban environment. And the audience is everybody. So it's residents, commuters, individuals, families, schools, clubs, organizations, anybody who happens to be in the city at some point in their lives during this weekend. So its goals are all about making connections. The main goal is to connect people to their local nature, right? We want people outside being thoughtful about these other species that live with us. And we do also, I mean, this is easier to do in a non-pandemic year, but we do want to also connect people to each other because, I mean, right now we're connecting through Genspace. We want, lots of our partner organizations are science organizations or they're environmental stewardship organizations, and we want, you know, people who are participating in the City Nature Challenge to connect with these groups to see who is, you know, what activities are happening, what stewardship opportunities there are. So that's a goal of the City Nature Challenge. At the same time, we are collecting a lot of data, and we want to connect that data to people who can use it. So scientists to land managers, and we want to continue to grow the global volunteer base for documenting biodiversity. And so all of the City Nature, you know, this happens on iNaturalist. All of the data live there. As they get, you know, vetted by the iNaturalist community, they do get shared with a wider scientific audience. And so hopefully we get a lot of people who are contributing to this database. And the other goal is to engage in friendly competition. There is no winning in a pandemic City Nature Challenge. We all contribute together, but in a non-pandemic, there's lots of like friendly rivalries that happen. So history of this, it started because the global organizers are the ones who started this. So it was first LA versus San Francisco in 2016. In 2017, it went across the US. That was the first time we participated in New York. In 2018, it went international and expanded in 2019 so this was the last sort of non-pandemic City Nature Challenge. We made almost 1 million observations with 35,000 people. And we had 159 cities. So that was great. You know, then 2020 happened and we had way more cities, but then we also had a pandemic. So what happened in 2020 was everything, like everyone canceled their public events, but most cities left their projects open so that people could participate individually if it was safe to do so. The other switch that was made, and it's the switch we're going with this year as well, is that there is no winning city. So in 2019, I believe Cape Town won the City Nature Challenge. But last year we did not declare a winner. We just had we had 244 cities. We had one global total of observations that all the cities contributed to, and one total for species and one total for people who participated. That is going to be the same kind of result we're going to have this year. Of course, we will be able to see how New York did. We will be able to compare the boroughs. We'll be able to compare parks and locations, and we will have a total that we will know, but there won't be like an official declaration of a winning city. These are the cities this year. So the over 450 cities. And I just want to talk now about how this actually works before we get into iNaturalist. So there are two phases of the City Nature Challenge. There's sort of the official days of the challenge, which are April 30th through May 3rd. This is when any observation you make during those 4 days gets automatically added to our city's totals. So all you have to do is have iNaturalist downloaded. You have to use it while you're standing in the city and taking a picture and uploading it to the database, and that's it. You don't have to do anything else. You could accidentally be involved in the City Nature Challenge if you happen to be using iNaturalist on those 4 days, because everything gets automatically aggregated by some functions of iNaturalist. So you don't have to do anything else. You just have to use it. Then results don't get announced until May 10th. And the reason for that week-long delay in announcing the results is for giving the iNaturalist community time to suggest species and make species agreements. Because one of the other totals we want is the total number of species found, and we can't figure that out until the iNaturalist community comes in and helps ID stuff. The weekend of the City Nature Challenge every year, even last year, is the busiest weekend on iNaturalist, or the busiest week on iNaturalist. A lot of observations come in, and it is overwhelming for the people who do a lot of the IDs. So we greatly appreciate the people who do the IDs. And these observations will live on the database, so they will continue to be ID'd after the City Nature Challenge. I mean, I still see changes in our data from past challenges, from past BioBlitzes. Sometimes it just takes a long time for people to come across an observation. But this week does add, it helps the species counts get up. There are, basically any observation is acceptable or will fall into our totals. There are some rules, which are more like guidelines. We want the observations to be as wild as possible. And what we mean by that is it is sort of more valuable to sort of the databases that these observations end up on, for observations to be of things that are not raised by humans. So wild stuff, not potted plants or plants in botanical gardens, or indoor plants, or animals that are in tanks or cages or pets. Those are not as useful to the scientific community, and so they become or they should be marked as captive cultivated. The community will often come in and do this for you, but it is better sort of community practice to mark your own observations. So we don't want to discourage people. So that's why we could exclude these observations, but we don't, because often the first observations that somebody will make when they just join iNaturalist are of something that is near them, that is probably captive or cultivated. And we don't want to discourage people from using iNaturalist. So those will still count, but we really want you to find wild things. Also, don't post humans. That's sort of a general iNaturalist rule. Or identifiable humans. Every year we do get somebody who posts like a picture of a group of humans, and they are here and they are in the city. So those will come into the project, but don't post like your nature selfies. Although post those on Instagram, you can tag them as CNC nature selfie, but don't put them on iNaturalist. And I think I said all this. So since we are still in the pandemic, there won't be a winning city. We are allowed to do sort of regional competitions. So we have set up some projects that, again, because this is automatic, you don't really have to like find these projects. You just have to participate, and your observations will fall into the right place. We have it set up so that we can compare the boroughs. We can have a battle of the boroughs and see who comes out on top. In the past few years, it's been Manhattan. Despite the fact that I did all of my observations in Queens, because that is near to where I am. I'm on Long Island, but just outside of Queens. So I did all my observations last year in Queens. We also this year are having a park by park competition, which I think is 14 or 15 parks that have set up their own sort of sub-projects where you can contribute to that park's total by making observations in that park. You know, mostly the focus of the challenge is to, you know, get outside. There are, you know, benefits to being outside and being thoughtful in nature. There's, you know, mental health benefits to this. It was the best part of my April last year was just being outside alone in nature. And we want to stress that you always follow the local safety guidelines. You know, you can observe from anywhere in the city. Like, you do not need to get on public transportation. You don't need to go into a crowd. There's going to be nature everywhere. And we will post some suggestions. We did this last year for things you can observe from home, so without leaving. I mean, obviously last year, you know, we were the epicenter of the pandemic, and it, you know, things were worse then. But if you're still uncomfortable leaving the house, you can still participate, because, you know, you can look out a window, you can look at the neighboring roof and see like a pigeon on it, or you can, you know, find something growing in the cracks on the sidewalk. You can find, like me, I can go in my basement and find a cave cricket. I did not invite those in there. I would like it if they didn't live with me, but since I'm not raising them, they count as City Nature Challenge observations. So now I want to get into iNaturalist, but I want to stop for a second. Are there any questions about City Nature Challenge, sort of how it works?
Kelly, you said it starts on the 30th and it goes through the 3rd, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so and can you start taking, so you don't start taking pictures that you upload to iNaturalist until then, or can you start doing it and those don't count until?
Everything has to have been observed April 30th through May 3rd. So your pictures have to have been taken April 30th through May 3rd.
Okay.
You can
Nobody's
upload
even
them
in
at
there
any
chatting with
point.
them.
Oh,
I opened the chat and I'm the only one that's chatted, and
you can upload at any point in the identification period and they'll still count, but the sooner you upload
they're
them,
youngsters, and sometimes when kids are trying to do, I mean, they're not kids, they're fucking, they're like Emily's age. Oh, college. No.
I can't do it because I'm sharing the screen right now. Oh wait, I can. Boop. Okay. So yeah, so you can upload them at any point in the identification period. So for example, when I'm out doing the City Nature Challenge, I'm mostly focused on taking the pictures, and I do all of my like tagging and putting up what species they are later. But what that means is by the end of the day, I have, you know, like 100 observations that I might not get uploaded, but that's fine because I can upload them, you know, if it's May 4th. All my observations will probably go up on May 4th because I'll just focus those 4 days on making them. But the sooner you get them up, the better chance they have of getting an ID because they've been in the database longer. Okay, so I'm going to, all right, so now we're going to do iNaturalist. If you have your phone with you, I have images in the slideshow, but it will help you if you have your phone like in your hand with iNaturalist open, because you'll see what I'm talking about and you can actually like touch the buttons. So the City Nature Challenge would not work were it not for iNaturalist, because this is how we're collecting all of the data. So it's a free mobile app. It's connected to a web database. It is not itself a citizen science project, but it is a very useful tool for citizen and community science because anyone can make an observation. And it's also built on a very strong community of users. So people who give you IDs, people who give you comments. So basically how this works, you use it to take a picture of something wild in nature, you share it, you upload it, and then people can talk about it. They can agree, they can suggest an ID if you don't know what it is. They can agree with what you think it is. They can disagree too. So it's like crowdsourced species ID from this community. It's, you know, and you can do a lot of things with that, right? So you can have your personal like list of species that you've encountered in your life, a life list. You know, it gives you those crowdsourced IDs. Each species on iNaturalist has its own page where you can get taxonomic information. You can get it links to the Wikipedia article about that species. You can get a little bit of an estimate of seasonality. I mean, you're using observations as a proxy for that, but it's still interesting. And you are creating useful data. So here is what an observation looks like from the website end. And I will talk about sort of the difference between the website and the browser. So this is an observation I made at one of our BioBlitzes. I knew this was a lady beetle. I did not know what species it was because I'm a plant biologist and I'm not an entomologist. So I put it up as what I knew it was, a lady beetle. Then 2 users came in and suggested a specific species. And so what happens then, I don't think I can use my cursor to point at stuff. So what happens then is all observations that come in with a photo or a sound, so evidence of the organism, are what iNaturalist calls needs ID. And you can see that in the second box here. A needs ID observation can become a research grade observation when 2/3 of the community agree with a species. So I had a bunch of people give IDs, 2/3 of them agree with that species. So this observation became research grade. Research grade observations, research grade is just a designation that iNaturalist uses for observations that will be fed into the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, or GBIF. GBIF is a library of databases like this where scientists can pull down data and use those to do research. So here's where you're contributing to the scientific community. Now, you can post observations. So any observation that gets marked casual, that gets marked captive or cultivated, or has no photo or sound, is called casual on iNaturalist, and the casual observations cannot become research grade. Again, they still count for the City Nature Challenge. They still count for your own records. But you know, if I saw a red-tailed hawk just now and I didn't have my phone out and didn't get a picture of it, but I want to record that I saw it, I could put that in as a no photo observation. It's a casual observation. It won't get fed into GBIF, but it's in my record. So I know that I saw it there, and that, you know, has personal value to me. So I think that's everything I want to say. Yeah. Now, an example of sort of the iNaturalist community and work that I really, really like is this one from a couple years ago. This guy and a couple of people in Santa Barbara in California found a huge dead fish that washed up on shore. They tagged it as an ocean sunfish, or a mola mola, which is a species we have in North America. And then someone comes in here and says, oh, they add more pictures. Someone comes in here and suggests that it's a different species. And what they do, this hoodwinker mola, and what they do is so this is an expert from, I think, New Zealand, because this is a, you know, an east side of the Pacific species that should not be in North America. But people are tagging these experts in the comments, and the experts are coming back and they're like, well, can you get more pictures? And so they go back and they find this fish again, which had, you know, the tide had moved it. They take more pictures. The experts directing them like what kinds of things you need to be in the photo. And this conversation goes on and on and on. And then finally you get to this one, this holy mola here, because the experts, like, you got all of this information you should, like, in this observation. And I can tell you that this is hoodwinker mola, which would be the first occurrence of this species in North America. And so this was on the news. This was like a big deal, but this all came from this interaction from the community. And a really great story. So this is sort of the power of iNaturalist here. And this is what I just took the screenshot this afternoon. So this is the current size of the database on iNaturalist. It's over 62 million observations made by 1.5 million people. And I mean, that's astounding. The iNaturalist database has grown so much. It started in 2008 in New York City. When we did our first BioBlitz in 2013, I think only 60 people had ever logged observations in New York City. And now it's exploded. So here's another question to think about while I take a drink of my coffee. So why are these data useful to scientists, or what are some of the questions that you think a scientist can answer with these data? Put it in the chat, or you can talk it, you can unmute if you're comfortable.
I would think during the pandemic, one thing that would be interesting to scientists would be to see if there have been changes to, like, you know, the way animals are interacting in the habitat because of the pandemic. This could be useful in determining that.
Absolutely. People are very interested to see if there's like, if there are more observations of more species that are just, you know, less comfortable around people, like moving into places where people have kind of been on a somewhat lockdown situation. I see in the chat, we have documenting climate change by where species are moving. Absolutely. Range shifts, seasonality shifts. So when people start to observe different species in different places, which is another climate change question. Anyone else want to suggest something? My favorite one is monitoring invasive species. So I did my research on an invasive plant, and so I'm always very interested in the invasives. And for example, a spotted lanternfly is, what year did that come here? It was a few years ago in Pennsylvania, and basically you can watch it spread by watching its yearly iNaturalist observations. And we do have them in New York now. I think last City Nature Challenge, last time I was talking about this, there were about 50, so probably last fall, there were about 50 observations of this in New York. This is a big, I mean, it's actually a very beautiful insect, but it's a huge pest. It leaves like a sticky mucus, and it, I believe it, I forget which plants it eats, but it's ones that people like. Well, oh yeah, they also like Ailanthus, which is an invasive itself, which is why we suspected it would be here because we have so much of that. And so people watch these observations of invasives come in on iNaturalist and use that as sort of a monitoring situation. So these data are very useful, and basically you're harnessing the power of the community here, because lots of people are walking around with cameras and GPS devices in their pockets, and they're using that. You know, this is way more data than, you know, an individual scientist could collect. You know, they're obviously not collected like systematically, like you would set up, you know, a systematic species survey, you'd run transects or set up plots or something, but it's still giving you useful information. So I've been, you know, hopefully you all have your iNaturalist accounts by now. People interact with iNaturalist in different ways. Some people only interact with it on the phone. Some people interact with it only on the browser. Some people do both. I do both, because they do have different functions. And so I want to go over that, because this will help if you want to participate in the City Nature Challenge, but you want to use like a regular camera, not your phone, because you definitely can do that. So here is what this looks like in the app. So I have an iPhone. Oh, I can point to stuff. I have an iPhone here, and I have an Android here. I mean, essentially these are this, you know, they're the same thing. They do the same thing, but they look different. And in one particular aspect that I always have to remember, the final step is called something different, which I really wish they would standardize. So on an iPhone, you know, you use the app, you take a picture with it. You can type in if you know what you're looking at, or you can leave it blank. Then you save it, and then you want to upload it. And if you don't upload it, it doesn't get onto the database. That's the last step. So, but on an Android, that last step is called syncing. So you make your observation, you save it, and then you have to sync it. So depending on which device you're using, that's going to be called something different, but it's like the most important step is to get it to the database. So in the app, this is sort of like your base of operations here. This is the Me panel in your app. And you're looking at all of your observations. You're looking at all the little buttons on the bottom. I believe in the Android, these swipe in from the side, but they should have the same options. If you click on observe, that is how you're going to use the app to take a picture. And so this does look slightly different now because the app was updated recently, but it essentially gives you the same options. I need to update this slideshow. Was there a question, Fran?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Just where I'm at.
Okay, sorry, I thought I heard something. So here I am, I'm taking this picture of this periwinkle. You click the button, you take the picture, and then it shows you this window. So now it has this, what did you see box? Now, I mean, I knew what I was looking at, but for demonstration purposes, you do not have to know what you are looking at to make an observation of it. And in fact, that's one of the best things about iNaturalist, that you will learn a lot of species that you don't know by posting them and interacting with the community. So if you click on that what did you see button, it'll take you to iNaturalist Species Suggester, which uses computer vision to suggest species for you. So based on visual similarity of the photo, location data, and then what they call community intelligence, which is basically like how other people in the iNaturalist community have identified photos that look like that. So in this case, it was right. It was pretty sure it was in the genus Vinca. And then it gives you suggestions for top 10 suggestions for what species it could be. I see a hand.
Kelly, yeah, you lost me. When you click on the picture, how do you get to the next screen to find out? Does it automatically come up, or is it something you have to press?
Yeah, here, I'll back up for a sec. Oops. Okay. So this is what it looks like when you're taking the picture. So that green button, you press the photo button, you press it. I think now it might give you an option to retake the picture. That might be might be the thing that I'm missing here.
Well, not on mine.
Okay. Oh, then it'll say something like this, like use photo. Is that what you think?
It'll say use photo? Oh.
Okay. You know what? If you're looking at my screen, it's going to be tiny now. So if you click on observe, and then it gives you these options, you can do it with the camera, you can do it from your library, or you can record a sound. So in this case, I want the phone to take the picture. I click this white button, so it's going to take a picture of me.
Right.
Boop.
Yeah.
Take it. Okay. Then it's going to say use photo or retake. You click use photo.
Okay, so it'll come up automatically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't it working? Oh. And then it'll bring you to that window.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And so that'll be this window that's up here on the screen now, where there's a box that says, what did you see? And if you click on that box, I can hear my kids laughing downstairs. If you click on that box, it'll bring you to the species suggester, which is this thing. So now if you're looking at this screen, you decide what you want to go with here. If you want to go with, what it's pretty sure about, you tap on that in this case where it says periwinkles, and then that will fill in periwinkle. Well, in this case I picked on I clicked the species it was. It fills that into the what did you see box, and then you press save, and then it comes. This is back to the me screen. It shows you that one observation that's waiting to be uploaded. Yes, Fran.
Oh, no. I should but I don't know where to upload it also. So let me get out of, I don't even know how to get out of this.
There should be a cancel.
Oh, okay.
At the top of the screen, I think.
No. Lower hand.
Okay. So yeah, so here's this observation I was making of myself. You can click on cancel right here if you want to go back.
Up on the top? Okay.
Yeah. So in this case, let's say I'm going to say save. Boop. And now there's this observation of me that I am absolutely not going to post, but it is waiting to be uploaded. And that's what it looks like here. So in this case, I'm waiting to upload this periwinkle. So this observation now lives locally on my phone. And it doesn't get counted for anything until it actually gets uploaded to the database. So you have to make sure that you do that step. So upload or sync, depending on which device you are using. There are other things in the app. So there's an activity, this little bell is the activity area. That will show you the my content part of this shows you, trying to get my arrow over here. The my content part of this shows you people who have agreed with your observation IDs or who have suggested IDs for you. The news one is the basically iNaturalist blog, and then any other projects you've joined, their journal posts. So you can see my last year's journal posts in this. There's also this more button, which will take you to projects. Now, this can be a little bit confusing because there are different kinds of projects on iNaturalist. Some of them you have to manually push your observations onto, and some of them, like the City Nature Challenge or like our BioBlitz, automatically go onto the project, so you don't actually have to click on anything. But if you want to see projects that are sort of near to you, that's what this area is for. Okay, so that's on the phone. There is much more functionality on the website. So if you're logged into iNaturalist and you go into your browser, the first thing you'll see here is your dashboard. And this will give you, anything you're following, any of your observations, any activity on them, access to your journal and projects that you're involved in. The part of this I use the most, though, this is an old slide because it has half as many observations as the other one. The part that I use the most, though, is the Explore button, which is where you have access to the entire database. And what you can do in Explore is if you click on the filter button, you can pull up observation lists for lots of basically anything. So if you want to see all of the observations in New York State, you could put that in as the place filter. If you want to see all the observations for the City Nature Challenge, you could put that in as a project filter. If you want to see all of my observations, you could put my username in the person filter. And then you can also filter by different, iNaturalist's iconic taxa, they call them categories. So birds, frogs, reptiles like mammals, fish, mollusks, and how they sort of break out the categories here. So this is just an example of looking for a specific place. It'll give you the boundaries of that place, and it'll give you everything that's been found in there. So that's very useful on the web. The really important one on the web is this is how you would upload your observations if you did not take them with your phone. So if you're using a DSLR or a point and shoot digital camera, you just have to get those files onto your computer, and then you drag them and drop them into this window here. So this is, there's an upload button that's it's right there. It's that green button on this page. So you can see it the whole time. And that'll bring you here to this upload area. So you take your digital files, you drag them over and you plop them in here. The only thing you have to remember is that you need to know where you were when you took those photos, or you need to be using an app that can attach the geotagging to those photos. That's what I do. Because what'll happen is, so you dump some photos in here. So here's 4 pictures I dumped in. And this is what lets you add location data. This lets you add or change the date on them. Most of these digital photos will have the date attached, so they'll be timestamped. So you don't really have to play around with that. But you might have to add location data. You can add you could add that information all at once on the left side of this column here. So if you highlight a bunch of these observations, you can see it says editing 3 observations. You could change them all at once here. And this is the way to get in your observations that are not taken on your phone. Because your photos, as long as you have location services turned on, which you should for the City Nature Challenge, they will already be geotagged, when you upload them. Even if you took them on your phone. So something that I will do, I will take a lot of observations on my phone. And then because I'm faster typing on a keyboard than I am with my thumbs, I will take my phone photos and plop them into this uploader. And then this way I can type in species names much faster. So that is an option as well. And then the other thing, you really can't do a lot of, you can't do like a bulk IDs, a lot of IDs on the phone. You can ID on the phone, but it's very much like a one at a time, like observation. You have to wait for each observation to upload. You kind of have to find them yourself. But on the website, there's this identity function. So it's right at the top of the website. You click on it. I believe the default thing that it will show you is the entire iNaturalist database that needs to be reviewed. You can, again, just the same way you could do a filtered search, you can put filters on this so that you're only looking for things that you know how to ID. Now for the City Nature Challenge, a lot of stuff gets put up with no tags, so put up as unknown. And so even if you're not a taxonomic expert or an expert in one particular species, you can still contribute to this identification process if you can tell what a plant is and what an animal is, because just putting that label in there really helps get those IDs faster. So this is, something you could do during the identification period of the challenge. So in this case, I think the place filter I have on here is New York plants. And I kind of set that up as my default thing to ID because that's what I like to ID. The other thing so you can view projects on the phone app, but there's more information it's easier to get to this information on the web. Each city for the City Nature Challenge will have its own project page, and this will be where you can watch all the observations come in. It'll give you leaderboards for who's making the observations. It'll give you a map. It'll tell you the percent research grade observations, and it'll show you everything that's in the journal posts. Now, you do not have to join this project. You just have to use iNaturalist during the days of the challenge. But a project is how these data get tracked for the City Nature Challenge. And it's a good place to get updates about events and the results. So I do think you should join this project, but you don't have to participate. And then if you poke around, you can see that there is sort of an umbrella project on iNaturalist that has all of the cities who participate in the City Nature Challenge, and you can see them all together in one project. Again, I do recommend joining, but you don't have to participate. So are there any questions about sort of the basics of iNaturalist?
Kelly, I just wanted to ask in terms of leading a City Nature Challenge event, which we do every year. So, the kind of participants, attendees that come that are very new with this, we should try to help them identify things as much as possible, or at least get them to do the plant animal categorization, or what do you recommend for letting people explore it on their own, but also guiding them?
For brand new users, usually after, I do the whole spiel about what iNaturalist is, the first question I'll get is, but do I need to know what I'm looking at? And the answer is no, because that's what the community is there for. If they're not confident, even saying if it's a plant or an animal, saying if it's a plant or an animal, giving a broad ID really does help get feedback from the community faster. So I would say if you know it's a plant, if you know it's an animal, at least put that in. But they don't have to worry if they don't know what species it is, because that really is what the community is there, the iNaturalist community is there for. If you tell them the ID and they want to type in that species, then that's great. But if you I've been on a few of the park rangers events, and they're really great. So thank you as a group for doing these every year. But you do get a lot of new users, you get a lot of families. So often a family, you'll have one person that's in charge of making the iNaturalist observations, and the kids will run around and find cool stuff to take pictures of. And then, whoever's doing the iNaturalist observations will take a picture of it. And that's totally fine. Really you have to sort of come to where they are. If they do need an account. So that's often the first step. They need to have that iNaturalist account. They need to be logged into it. And then just getting people to do an observation sort of near to you, so they could so they could show you what they're looking at. And then, suggesting that they put in it like a broad scale ID, like plant or animal or fungus or something, is good. If they know more than that, that's great. If not, they should watch that observation and see how people identify it. And that's another thing you can tell them too, is like, a lot of people will speed through these IDs and not leave comments, but if they see somebody that's identified something, you can leave a comment and say, hey, thank you for that ID. Can you tell me how you knew that? And that's a way to sort of learn from the community and from this interaction, to get more knowledge about what these species are that are around.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's really helpful, because it is part of it is teaching them how to use it on their own and get the feedback and go through the process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's actually a really great question too, because it's pretty easy to get started and to use the app to take a picture of something. But you can get faster help from the community if you make what I'm calling good observations. And for me, a good observation is one that is able to, get a better ID, like at a finer scale than you would have been able to get or with a like single shot picture or something. So that's what I mean by good IDs here, or good observations here. Good observations are ones that can get an identity from the community. So there's some general iNaturalist tips here that will help get those IDs. And I just want to go through, that's what I'm going to go through for the rest of this.
Can I make a comment first?
Yeah.
On the subject of the general IDs, because I'm not a specialist in anything. So after I'd done my uploads for the City Nature Challenge last year, and yes, I do remember it was you on some Zoom group that we were identifying, and you were touting, if you don't leave things that are unknowns, because people who are expert go looking for their specialty. So people who know birds will look for something tagged as a bird. And there's actually a thing in the identify page where you can seek out only birds or only trees. So I got to doing that. And first of all, it's very helpful when you upload things yourself. If you can do that, even just to bird, tree, mammal, fish, that helps a lot to be found by the experts. But if you can't, somebody mentioned that she can't walk very far for observing. You would be a perfect person to learn how to do this and go through. And of course, every once in a while I see something where it's like, I know exactly that is a Canada goose, or I know exactly, what kind of a plant that is.
Right.
But in general, I wound up doing like 2,000 of them by July. Because I expanded beyond that. It is ridiculous. If you look at that, you'll think I'm some kind of an expert on something. But if you actually look at my observations, I'm not. But I have to tell you, if you do that, once you suggest an identity for an observation, iNaturalist automatically causes you to follow that observation. So you get notices whenever somebody else comes along and notifies it or comments on it or something, which, by the way, you'll want to eventually unfollow them, because otherwise your homepage looks like, I don't know, it's ridiculous. But the first time I did a bunch of those, and I logged in the next day, and there were like 40 comments from people who had identified to a much finer degree, sometimes going all the way to research grade, things that I just called a bird. Yeah, it was so satisfying. So if you think it sounds silly to just sit there and say tree, bird, oh, I know that's a cardinal. It is a little, it's a nice mindless job on a hot day when you don't feel like doing anything. I did a lot of them in July, but it's a very satisfying thing when they come back. I'm still getting things that are finally getting to research grade, and I look and it says that a year ago I said that was a bird. And somebody's finally gotten around to a fine enough degree to reach research grade and say what kind of a bird it is. And that's my piece.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing it. Because that is, you're right. People will I only look at the plant observations. A lot of birders on iNaturalist will only look at bird observations, but are also really fast about the way they follow them. So if you put up a cardinal, but you don't put any tags, it's going to sit in the unknowns for a long time. But if you put a cardinal up as aves or birds, you're going to get an ID probably within half an hour because they're really fast about it. So having those broad IDs does really help, and you do get the feedback from the community. So that's another difference from the phone and the website. On the phone, let's see here, you get notifications for people who add IDs or add comments here. It's easier to see those notifications on the website. So that's another sort of difference between the phone and the website. So for making these good observations, first, you should really be familiar with whatever it is you're taking the pictures with. So if that's your phone, can your phone get wet? Are you using an appropriate case for it? Because I'll tell you, last year I went out in the rain with a case that I did not think about. It was like an OtterBox, and it was water was getting into it and sort of getting stuck under the screen, or under the case on the screen. I couldn't do stuff. So knowing your device and your case and your equipment and what it can and cannot do is important. If you can, a lot of things like lichens or things like small insects, it is better to get a close picture, and sometimes the phone's not great at that. And so if you could get one of these little clippy macro lenses, that can also help. And then just know that whatever you're taking your photos with, if it doesn't have its own sort of geotagging system, or if you don't have an app that does that, you do need to have, pen and paper with you or something, so you can write down where you were when you took that picture, because you will need that location data later. Because if it doesn't go up with a location, it can't get aggregated with our City Nature Challenge observations. For
Kelly,
animals, oh yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just, I'm not totally sure about where you, so you put I always get to the screen of what did you see? Mm-hmm. Where do you put, supposing you think you know what it is, it's a plant, for instance, and you think it's yellow dock or something, where do you put that information? Because I feel like I'm skipping that step and I don't see where to do it.
You can, if you want to suggest it as yellow dock, you put that in the what did you see. If you're not confident, but you still want to have that note there, you should put it up as plant and then put it in, come on.
Okay, so when you click on what did you see, in that little search box, you write, okay, got it, thank you.
So you can put it up there, and if you want, and if you want people to know that you weren't confident about it, you can put that in this description box here, because there's a text field under here. You can't see it. There's a text field under here where you can type in notes. And so if you think it's yellow dock, but you're not 100% sure and you're not confident enough to put that in the species area, you put that in the notes. iNaturalist, I think, will actually pull placeholder text, I think, from the description, if there's not if it's just a species name. It will also pull placeholders if you put it in as a name that it doesn't recognize, and people can see that when you upload it. It just doesn't get sorted because it'll be an unknown. So okay. It's still better to put something that, as much as in that what did you see field, and then you can make notes about I'm 50% sure it's this, or whatever notes you think will help the people who are looking at your observation.
Okay, and can you change that too? I'm just experimenting with it now to try to see, I put yellow dock, but now I think maybe it was cup plant. So
you can always edit your observations, and this is one of the really great improvements they just did. Well, I mean, it's easier for me to explain it to people now than it used to be. So to go to an observation, you click on that observation. There's an edit button in the corner, and then you can change anything in here. And you can also delete the observation. This used to be hidden, and so I'm glad it's here now because I can show people. There's a button to delete it if you've made a mistake.
Wonderful. That's super helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. So other sort of tips for making good observations: if you're observing an animal, take the picture as soon as you see it, because it will likely get away from you. This is why I prefer plants. Take the shot, and then either with your zoom or by getting closer, take the shots as you get closer to it before it runs away. Don't harass organisms. That is never a good idea. But if you can get safely closer to something, a closer picture is better. But often you might get one chance to take that picture. Karen can outrun most plants. Focus is also really important. So make sure whatever it is you're trying to get ID'd is the focus and centered in the picture. Now that is often not hard, or that is often hard to do. Again, if it's something like an animal that you just got one shot to take the picture. In that case, that is another place where you should use that description field to add information. So, like if I posted a picture, if I just went outside and posted a picture of like a big field of weeds, it might be very pretty, but the person who's looking at that observation does not know which particular plant I want ID'd. And so that's why you need to use that description field to say, oh, I can only get this picture because I was driving past it. I do a lot of passenger side iNaturalist observations. But this is a picture of Queen Anne's lace, and you can see it right, in the bottom corner of the picture. Just put more information in there so that if it's not clear what the focal species is, that it's clear from the notes. Something for scale is always important. So this is a tiny sedum. It might not have been clear how small that tiny sedum was unless my thumb was in it, in the picture. So if you have a coin or a pencil or a ruler, anything that can add size information, you can also put this in, you could type in size information in the description field. I saw a really big moth at my train station last year. And I took a picture of it. You couldn't tell how big it was. So I had to slowly get closer to it. And all I had on me was my Metro card. So there's like an observation I have of a big moth that's the size of a Metro card. And so that gives information to the people who are IDing it. That might help in making that ID. This is not about making good observations, but just a reminder to be aware of your surroundings, especially in these pandemic times. Like, you don't want to be in a crowd or, be breathing on somebody. And knowing the local hazards, it is often very cold during the City Nature Challenge, so dressing appropriately. Poison ivy will be just tiny leaves out right now, but still will give you contact dermatitis. So you should know what that looks like. We do have ticks, we do have mosquitoes. It is important to be aware of these places. It's important not to, go places you shouldn't be going. That's just a reminder in there before we get into more making good observation tips. So now I want to talk specifically, this is the last bit, specifically about different kinds of things you can be observing and what might be useful to have in the photo. Oh, and Karen is saying in the chat here, you can, if you take a picture that has more than one organism, like a bee on a flower, you can make an observation from the bee and make an observation for the flower. You just have to post that pic twice, and you do have to say in the notes, like, this is the observation for the bee, this is the observation for the flower. So that's totally allowed. Oh, I didn't see that was a response to Allison. Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for answering that. So if you are taking a picture of a plant, so observations can have more than one photo in them, and I strongly encourage you to use that function because that will help you get better IDs. Because, for example, with plants, you can have a whole picture, a whole photo of the entire plant, but then some other key features are really important for getting that identification. So you might want to add the leaf attachment pattern. So in this case, this bed straw, in this second picture I was trying to show that there's a whorled pattern of like where these leaves are attached to the stem. The leaf surface, whether it's hairy or not, the top and the bottom of the leaf, the whole leaf shape, and flowers. If a plant is in flower, that flower is real important to getting an ID. So make sure it is in at least one of the pictures that you are posting for that observation. For something like a tree, I do see a lot of like trees from very far away getting on iNaturalist, and they're not that easy to ID that way. So, include that picture in your observation if you want, but also include some finer details. So add a picture of the bark, add a picture of the leaf attachment again, the leaf shape, flowers or fruits, all of that stuff helps you get that ID. For a mushroom, getting a whole one and then getting some other character. So here's a whole picture of that mushroom, and then I sort of got my phone underneath the cap to get a picture of the color and the arrangement of the gills. And then if you want to add pictures of the substrate that the mushroom is growing on, because often these are associated with specific species, and that can give someone information. And then for animals, we did talk about this. So get that safety shot before you scare it away. And then keep taking pictures. So in this panel here, there is an Italian wall lizard in each of these pictures, but I was just like, I heard it and I was like, bah, 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 with my phone, because I did not know exactly where it was, and I could tell that it was running away from me. And then I went through them and I found the best one was the one with the circle on it, where you can see its head. Now, we don't have a lot of lizards in New York City, so I was very confident in what this was. But to help other people give me that confirmation, that confirming ID, I used my, like, you know, the markup tool on your phone to add a circle around where it was, just to direct people. So you could do that to your photos. You can also give directions in the description. So like, there's an Italian wall lizard in the center, sort of to the right of this picture. Okay, so that was it. That's my whirlwind tour of iNaturalist and a City Nature Challenge and making good observations. There are some City Nature Challenge things still coming up. So there's all the Genspace walks that you have the links for in the chat. I am doing a webinar specifically on making good observations of plants. It's quick. It'll be half an hour. It's one of the ones I did for our remote BioBlitz this year to help our students make observations. So it's got a tiny bit of botany in it to help you at least put the broad categories of plants, you know, like vascular, non-vascular, seedless, or so that kind of a thing. Next Wednesday, there will be a community and citizen science happy hour that will be mostly about making IDs. It's very casual. It's usually a small number of people. And then we will have daily virtual meetups to sort of replace that interaction that, you know, you would normally get if you were going out with a lot of people making observations. So if you want to come into those, again, those will be very casual, but they will also be really good places to ask questions. So if you want to use the next week to try to make some observations, get a little practice on iNaturalist, and then come back with some questions, I am very happy to take those questions at these daily meetups. And the links to those are in the linked document that I put in the chat earlier. So thank you very much to listening to all of that. I know it was a lot of information, but I'm happy to have any discussions, any questions now. And my contact information is there if you think of something later. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm also going to stop recording, right? Yes.